facilitators have statements prepared, but we strongly encourage you to actively engage throughout the dialogue out loud or in the chat box. And in fact, this will only be successful if we all actively participate. We will have breakout rooms. After the statements, we will break into smaller groups and a facilitator will have questions prepared for the group. Everyone will remain muted, so when you wish to speak, please raise your hand and a facilitator will call on you. When we call on you, please unmute yourself. At the end, we will come together for closing comments and a song. While this is meant to be a civil dialogue, there may be points of discomfort. We encourage you to question where that discomfort comes from and to delve into respectful conversation with other participants. As you may know, today on June 19th, we celebrate Juneteenth, a celebration of Black liberation, excellence, and pride. In doing so, we must also recognize the painful history of racism in our country with open and honest dialogue. With that, I open the floor for Professor Clinton Nichols, who will give us an opening statement and a context for today's dialogue.
Thank you so much, Jackie. My charge for today's discussion involves focusing our attention to policing Black lives over American history and across geographic scales, from this country overall to our Dominican campus community. Police have been killers of Black people and Black dreams from the slave patrols that operated for about 200 years before the development of modern police departments in the 1830s. Our focus, however, shouldn't simply be on the actions of officers and departments. The unwillingness of Chicago police officers to arrest any of the men who threw stones at 17-year-old Eugene Williams because the raft he and friends were on drifted onto the white side of Lake Michigan reminds us that inaction by the state proves fatal for bodies and dreams. This incident sparked a week-long pogrom led by white Southsiders, one of whom would become the city's mayor. By early August 1919, 60% of those killed were Black, and approximately 1,000 Black families lost their homes and possessions through arson. Red Summer 1919 here is a reminder about who counts, whether anyone is accountable, and that even inaction can have fatal consequences for persons and dreams. We live in a violent country, and that violence takes many forms. Looking at police requires us to acknowledge state-authorized violence and state-sanctioned or endorsed violence. I oppose both and wish to see both reduced to zero on an annual basis. Sadly, we are far from reaching that goal. According to the Guardian newspaper, in the first 24 days of 2015, American police officers fatally shot 59 people. By comparison, from 1991 until the end of 2015, police officers in England and Wales fatally shot 55 people over that 24-year time span. Statistics kept by the Washington Post suggest this year will be no different. So far, approximately 483 people have been fatally shot by the police. And for those who have not been keeping count, since the death of George Floyd, almost 50 people have been killed by the police. The Post's methodology to record fatal encounters with police limits its vision to shooting. So while Breonna Taylor's murder counts, and remember, almost 100 days since her death, the local prosecutor still has not brought charges resulting in any officer's arrest. George Floyd's murder does not count in that newspaper's database. African-American men account for roughly 20% of these fatalities, and they have every year since The Guardian and The Washington Post started counting. I will also call your attention to the fact that the FBI, despite the 1994 crime bill, which authorized the FBI to do so, has yet to maintain or develop adequate numbers for people killed by the police in this country. So we have to rely on newspaper efforts. But I also want to focus our attention to our community and to River Forest, which many of us have not been to since mid-March. I like to hold the image of Dominican as a dream incubator for many of our students and possibly for some faculty and staff. The university nurtures and develops student skills, and it expands their vision of their potential. However, I fear we do not do enough to look squarely at the way the university's actions or inactions often kills dreams. We know that the River Forest Police Department has a practice of stopping disproportionate numbers of African American and Latinx motorists. So we must acknowledge that Black and Brown students, as well as faculty and staff, face an elevated risk of encountering police on their way to and from campus. And let's not forget that a traffic stop resulted in the arrest and the suspicious death of Sandra Bland. But the university's own handling of conduct cases suggests a disproportionate number of Black students, particularly our male students, face internal disciplinary action compared to white or Latinx counterparts. I hope our stated commitment to creating a more just world involves looking at hard truths about what and how we are doing things here on campus. I hope we commit ourselves to a range of alternatives that handle various forms of problematic behavior in less punitive and less lethal ways in River Forest, across Chicagoland, and throughout this country. I hope my remarks this Juneteenth and within Pride Month stimulate thinking about the way policing has limited freedom for Black people and others in the country, so that we can focus its actions on more freedom for Black people and all in this country and around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Schools. So with that, now I Laura Berger, 2021, Kayla Welton, 2021, and Dr. Sophia Duffy, who will share some opening remarks.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Lauren Berger, and I'm just going to be sharing some remarks regarding Juneteenth within our Dominican community. Dominican University makes an effort to ensure all students feel safe and welcome in all spaces around campus. Within the past few years, the university has also taken big steps to promote diversity and inclusion across the campus. With all these initiatives, many students still feel unheard and underrepresented, especially our African American students. There is a clear underrepresentation of Black faculty and staff and a declining rate of African American student retention. I believe a lot of work still needs to be done to ensure our African American students are able to call Dominican home. Juneteenth, a holiday celebrated every June 19th to commemorate Black liberation. This holiday is mainly celebrated within African American homes, but with the recent events in our nation, more Americans are looking to observe this holiday and start educating themselves on the history that this holiday holds. Many companies and organizations are even looking to observe this holiday as well. But this poses a question. Will this become an annual observation, or are people solely engaging in this idea because of the climate our country is in? So Dominican University, will we as a community be observing this holiday annually to commemorate Black liberation and celebrate our Black students, faculty, and staff members? Will we be taking active steps to ensure our African American students, faculty, and staff are able to relax and enjoy a day in history that is so often hidden from society? In what ways can the university ensure our African American students, faculty, and staff are celebrated on this day? The hope is Dominican University will establish and institutionalize an annual celebration for Juneteenth, including enhancing education materials, listening to and uplifting Black voices on campus year-round, and actively working towards an anti-racist climate.
All right, and now I have my opening statement. My name is Kayla Welton. So while we are prompted to be here today for this necessary dialogue regarding Black lives in the U.S., I would like to first give you all a quote to think about. The quote is, "You can't separate peace from freedom because no one can be at peace unless he has his freedom." This quote to me is exactly how I feel being African American in today's society. And that says a lot about the society, considering that this was said by Malcolm X on January 7th, 1965. I wasn't born until April of 1999 and am now 21, but somehow this quote is still relatable for me. While I may not agree with a lot going on, I do deeply understand the frustration of my people. Everyone has their own methods and they may not make sense to many, but African Americans haven't been free for 400 plus years, so how can you expect them to be at peace? While we are able to get jobs and have families and live what many may look at as normal lives, our lives are far from it. We went through slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, the civil rights movements, mass incarceration, and that's just to name a few. But we are still reminded of them all in our everyday lives because the laws may have changed, but the people didn't. I'm 21, having a discussion about what it feels like to be African American, while others my age don't have to think about the color of their skin and how it affects every move they make. Every day I wake up, it's like I have something to prove. When I go to class, when I go to work, when I'm talking to people that don't have similar backgrounds as me, it's exhausting. And I just want to say I'm tired of being exhausted and seeing my people blatantly killed for nothing when others get away scot-free for actually committing crimes and maybe getting put on probation or sent to a mental institution for a few months. And that's just one example. To close out my statement, I would just like to say that I'm tired of being tired. Thank you.
I think it's my turn, right? Yes, okay. Thank you for that. I think that's a nice, you couldn't have organized that better because it's a nice transition to my statement. So I'm Sophia Duffy. I'm in the psychology department. So I just prepared a brief statement. So I want to talk about the mental health impact of violence against Black bodies. Being witness to and or experiencing violence in present time is traumatic in itself, but there's a historical trauma that is also activated when we witness or experience violence. And violence doesn't need to be physical. In current times, this violence is often less obvious. Violence is the disinvestment in Black communities. It is the constant gaslighting that occurs when our society and our government tells us to work hard to achieve the American dream while also piling bricks of oppression on us. It is the lack of concern and action when Black girls and women are missing, abused, and even murdered. So the historical trauma that is 400 plus years of violence against Black bodies, right? And we have cellular memory, right? So while we don't have explicit memories, we have implicit memories. Our bodies remember. So when we see violence today, it is triggering of 400 years of violence. And subconsciously, the body, the mind, the soul reacts. So this may look like extreme fatigue, difficulty concentrating, hypervigilance, feeling of doom without clear evidence or threat, feeling off, getting sick more often and taking longer to recover, unexplainable aches and pains, unexplainable sadness, daydreaming, or having trouble being in the present moment. All of these things are trauma symptoms. And we have implicit memories of the torture that was slavery, the torture that came after slavery during Jim Crow, and also the torture and trauma that's in our current environment. And while now sometimes it's in different forms and sometimes it's not, it's all triggering us whether consciously or unconsciously. So we are experiencing exposure therapy without intending to do so. And evidence-based exposure therapy has to be cushioned with engagement in self-care, in self-love, in joy, and in rest. So as we talk about these issues, and also we're witness to what's going on in our society, I just want us to remember that for many people in this country, we're currently going through exposure therapy, right? And we need space, time, and resources to engage in all of the things that go along with exposure therapy. And then the second thing I was asked to talk about was just my experiences with racism and white supremacy in academia. And, you know, it's part of my daily lived experience. So to talk about all of the ways I experienced this, we'd be on this call for a very long time. So I just want to point out one way in which I see these oppressive processes play out in academia and in just my field of psychology. I'm in clinical psychology generally. So the one major way that I see this play out is that I am often one of few Black people in any space, in academia, in psychology. And I believe really strongly in our university's mission, our values, and I have faith that we're working towards fully realizing our mission, our values. But I can't ignore that, again, in this space, I am one of few Black people, right? I have wonderful colleagues. I love working with my colleagues in my department and other departments, but I'm one of few. And so there are many factors that can account for why that is, but we can't ignore that it is institutionalized racism and white supremacy that have contributed to why I am and I continue to be one of few. So I also feel like our university is a place where we can dismantle and correct this. So I recently heard somebody talk about the statement that's often used when we want to talk about allyship and bringing people together and moving people forward, is that we want to bring more X people to the table, right? So bringing more Black people to the table, which is to symbolize this allyship and fight for the progression of Black people. But this person that was talking about this statement talked about how this statement is really more like gaslighting than it is a helpful statement, because it assumes continued ownership of this table, right? And it maintains status quo because the table remains the same. And so asking Black people to come to this table is really asking them to negotiate their worth and to have a voice at a table of oppression. And so really we just need to build a new table. That's the end of my.
Thank you all so much for sharing that. So now we will move into the 4 separate break rooms, and you will have, hopefully, if this works out well, you'll have a facilitator in each of them who will have some questions for the group. So just bear with me as I separate us. The questions that we have in mind have been to reaction to what we have been seeing over the past few days. So whether that's protests, whether that is police brutality, anything related to even Dominicans' treatment of Black students and students' experiences. So please share your thoughts loud as well as in the chat box. Okay, thank you all for participating in the dialogue today. I hope it provided an incentive to keep learning about issues that impact historically marginalized communities. The protests and activism of the last few weeks call us to join as active accomplices, not as passive allies. This week, we heard 2 SCOTUS decisions that protect immigrants with DACA and LGBTQ+ individuals in the workplace. We have witnessed several cities declare Juneteenth a formal holiday. Several cities have changed their policies and protocols regarding arrest in an attempt to prevent unnecessary deaths. These decisions took place as a result of dialogues and activism that disrupted the status quo. We invite you to join us in future dialogues and to use the momentum to enact change in your own spheres of influence. In the chat box, you will see a couple of resources for continued learning, and now we will close with a song to celebrate Emancipation Day.
Every chain, break every chain, break every chain.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.